How do we get things done? That is the million-dollar question, right? In today's podcast, we're going to talk about making a list, prioritizing that list, executing on that list, evaluating the list, and then starting the cycle all over again.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you're new to the Declutter Hub podcast, you're so welcome. What you'll find is that we try and find a fun factor in the serious business of decluttering. And if you've been here for a while, you know exactly what we mean. So thank you so much for listening.
If you'd like to get involved in conversations relating to this podcast, it all takes place in our Facebook group. So come and join our lovely, warm, supportive community. To find the Facebook group, go to declutterhub.com/group to find out more, or you can search for the Declutter Hub community on Facebook.
Hi, Leslie. I am excited to be here to talk about lists and everything else. But before we do that, we had a lovely review come in, right?
Yeah. Oh, nice. Do you want to read it out? It was lovely.
Yes.
You love to read out a review, don't you?
I do.
I'll let you do that. You kind of, it felt as if you were going to let me do it, but I wouldn't like to steal that little part of your role away.
Exactly, because we got a review in from a lovely lady who said, I just wanted to make contact. I love your podcast and your content. I just listened to your episode about legacy and it made me cry. I have huge sentimental attachment to my grandparents who almost brought me up. And I have some silly things that remind me of them. And also my grand's daily diaries of 30 years with mundane stuff about doing the laundry and my granddad being in the pub too long. And it makes me so happy to read them. And I also wanted to let you know that your podcast also helps a great deal with my mental health. I have MS and severe panic. And when I had to leave the house the other day, I could feel the panic rising. I put a podcast on and it made me so much better just to hear you two chatting along and joking. So a massive thank you, as you make my life better in so much more ways than I can tell you. I'm just about to cry, Leslie. How lovely is that?
I know. There's so much in there that I love so much. Do you know what I mean? That makes me so happy because it's hard, right? Life can be hard for a lot of people, and some people get many more things thrown at them than other people. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And life's hard for everybody, but some people are really going through the mill, and, you know, we're delighted. And thank you so much for sharing that with us, that a little bit of kind of Ingrid and Leslie in your ear stops the panic from rising and makes you feel a little bit calmer. And so that's everything that we want to do. Even if nobody learns a thing about decluttering, which we hope that you do, it just makes us really happy that we can kind of calm you down. That's what it's all about. And also, you know, talking about that podcast about legacy, it was creating your lasting legacy, I believe. I can't remember, Ingrid, you need to dig out what number that was, but it was a lovely podcast where we talked about, you know, things from the past and what you should do to sort of to prepare for when you're not here anymore and things like that. And honestly, those kind of things, those diaries, those things that people are talking about are really what makes life very special. And if you've got those kind of things and you can share those and you have those and you know the stories behind those before that person passes away, it makes them so much more special. And that's what that podcast is all about. And it really resonated with a lot of people, that podcast, didn't it, Ingrid? So yeah, if you haven't listened to that, go along and take a listen and see whether it resonates with you. But for now, thank you so much. It makes us really happy that you took the time to write in and tell us how our podcast is affecting you and making you a little bit calmer in your day-to-day life. So thank you. You've made our day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Leslie.
Can we not just talk about that lovely instead of doing the podcast?
I know.
It's a lot more dry what we're going to talk about.
I know.
If this lady listens to this podcast, it's not going to make her, it's going to make her panic more and more, isn't it? This is not good. But anyway,
I know, because we've got like a hard podcast. It's like talking about getting things done and to-do lists and prioritization and all of the serious business. I mean, because we all have a lot to do in our lives. Let's be honest. We all have a lot to get through. Whether you're by yourself, live as a student, or are downsized, or your kids have fled the nest, or you still have got loads of kids walking around. There's always so much to do. And I think for us, I think having a list really helps. But other people might just think, I'm not sure about this whole list situation. So we're going to talk about how a list helps us to get things done, right?
But do you like the idea of having loads of things to do? Let's take it right back down to basics. Do you like having things to do or not?
I think I do, actually. I don't know what to do with myself. I think when there's nothing, I'm like, oh, what do you mean nobody needs me? Wants me? I don't need to do anything. I mean, I can do that on holiday, like lie at the pool and just relax. But when I'm at home, I'm like, right, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Because I'm just a doer, I think.
I think it's really interesting, actually, because recently a lot of my friends, husbands of friends, things like that, they're starting to retire. Okay, so retirement is very much on the agenda, and so people are starting to. They've got a term for it, right? They call it to go. Like, when are you going to go? It seems to be like the term that people use for retirement, which is like slightly strange. I think. Yeah. Oh, when are you going? I'm like, is that actually a new phrase that I've not heard about? But anyway, it obviously is. And so, but I think as people are starting to retire, I kind of look and, I'm certainly not ready to go, as they say, at this moment in time. I definitely know that much, but I can understand why people are. If people, many, Steve, a lot of other, particularly people who've not had any break at all, like often as women of our age, we've had some kind of a break from it at some point. Even if you've worked all your life, you might have had even 6 or 8 weeks off if you've had a baby or pregnancy or something. Like, many people have had a little break from it along the way, a little bit of respite along the way. But some people literally started working when they were like 18 years old and have never stopped, and they're now 60. And so I can understand why the thought of not doing nothing, but not having a full kind of quota of things that you need to get done every day is very appealing.
Mm. Well, just to dispel any myths, Leslie, you're not going anywhere. I cannot run the Declutter Hub without you. Right? So for the foreseeable future,
all right, well, I'm still going to be here when I'm like 82 or something, still turning up and trying to laugh about getting things done. I'll definitely be gone by then. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing, because I think some people have got energy, and some people love and thrive on getting things done. And I think you and I fall into that category. It makes us tick to get things done. And sometimes I do think about, as it's laid, up against you every time, I think, what would I like do? Like, what do you do all day? Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure you do, because you just got to blend into a different way of working, right? But you would have less things to do. Maybe you make those things last a little bit longer. You take your time over them. It's not quite as frantic. I don't know. I'd love to know from people who are retired how that transition from having a very kind of busy working life with lots of things to get done to maybe it's just you on your own or you and a partner, and you've been able to slow right down and sort of tune into a different way of working. I think that's really an interesting concept for me, and I'm not ready to go there yet, I guess, is the point. But I admire it, because people have lovely lives without less things to do, in that, like, it's not, you can do nice things, right? Things that you want to do. You know what I mean?
now you're making it sound like you don't want to be with me here every day, Leslie.
Exactly. Well, no, not exactly. No, you're okay for a little while longer. I'll give you a couple more years at least. Anyway, established that you and I like to do things, but we have a lot of things to do. And in order to get ourselves through life, whether that's when we've been really busy, when we've been less busy, I've always needed a list. Without a list, I would be floundering around in life. So how do we get our lists to work for us?
I agree. Like you, I've had a list for my personal life. I've had a list for my business or when I was at work. I had a list. I've always had different lists. For me, it's crucial for me to stay on track. For a while, I even had I still have a places that I want to visit with the kids list, or things that I want to do. A list of TV shows. You tell me all the time about good TV shows that I need to watch. They're in a whole list. But I'm not obsessively checking all of the list every day, but I've got it in. But I don't have to hold on to all the information because I know it's in a list somewhere.
So in terms of list, so you talked already then about, you've got a list of TV shows, you've got a list of places you want to visit. So you have got aspirational lists, right?
Yeah.
Things you want to do in life. So I've not got anything on a list that is things that I want to do.
Okay.
I have no aspiration. Maybe I've got no aspirations.
I do not believe that one bit, Leslie.
They're all in my head. They're in my head. The nice things are all in my head. The things that I keep lists for are work related, mostly. And that would be like 98% of the list would be work related. And then I would probably have small lists that are to do with domestic things that need doing, things that need doing around the house. That list might get bigger if I'm doing in the middle of a big project, of course, if I'm doing like some kind of refurbishment or a room or whatever. But generally, I would have a handful of things that need to get done around the house that I would have on a list. But other than that, it's all completely work related. Even domestic things. Oh, no, actually, I have got some like a life admin list as well. So as well as like projects and kind of paint this room or fix this thing, I haven't got like things like pay this bill, but I would have something that had a little bit more of a time scale on it. So I have some like life admin things if it's something that I keep procrastinating on. Those are the things that would go on my list.
Yeah, because I think, I think if we've got a lot in our heads, it's like, how do you then get things done? Because how do you get from all the things that you have to do, how do you prioritize, right? So because in exactly what you're saying, when it's really overwhelming, all the stuff in your head, it can feel really overwhelming, and then you can procrastinate about doing stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think overwhelm is a big part. I mean, for me, certainly, one of the big things about doing things is writing a list. So you and I will do things, we'll see things, we'll do training courses, and then we have to spend the time after that with all of the kind of airy-fairy ideas that we've got to write them down so that at some point there's a chance of them getting executed on, right? Yeah. So we have to take that information to the next stage. And I think that's where a lot of people don't do that. They listen to think that's a brilliant idea. They, pull out a recipe from a magazine, bookmark something that they've read on the internet, but don't take it to that next level where it's something that will get something done with it at some point. It might be 2 years down the line that something gets done, but it's written, recorded digitally or written somewhere on a list. And I think that's really important to actually get it on a list, because if it's not on a list in my head with everything that's got to go on, then it's never getting done.
Yeah.
Unless it's going on holiday to Hawaii, which is in my head, and I definitely will go there without it being on the list. I won't forget that one. I won't forget that one.
No. So we've been talking a lot about before we recorded this podcast, right? Like, how do you do it? How do I do it? And what we both agreed upon is that it's really important, if you have a lot of things whirling around in your head, to do a brain dump. Because I think just having it somewhere on a digital list or having it on a paper list will really help you the next steps forward. Because if everything is crammed into your head, how do you see the wood for the trees if you can't? Because that's what people say. Oh, I've got so much to do and I don't even know where to start and I'm feeling so overwhelmed. And I'm like struck down with procrastination because I don't even know. We're like, just do a brain dump, right? Write it all down. And then with that list, you start to categorize.
And you know what, Ingrid? In order to facilitate that brain dump, you might need to categorize before you do the brain dump. So, I'm like, oh, there's things that need doing in the house. Sometimes I will go, I need to walk around the house and I need to look at each room individually to write a list, because it's only when I go into that room that my memory will be jogged about the things that need to be done in that room. And perhaps if I'm sitting down in my office, I might not remember that. And so I think sometimes you need to kind of almost compartmentalize that list making in your head. So go, okay, so now I'm going to think about this individual project or this individual room if it's a decluttering project, or I'm going to think about all the banking things that need to be done, or I'm going to think about all the things that need to be done with my kids or with school or with work or with, because if you're feeling quite chaotic and overwhelmed, you can't just suddenly gather together a list of 300 things in your life that needs doing. So you might need to start to think about them one category at a time before you even do your brain dump. I think it's really important as well, Ingrid, to know how your mind works. And so I know for a lot of people, some of their best ideas, and these might be ideas that come up, or, oh, I need to do that. I need to do that. You can't sleep because all these things, crazy things are whirring around in your mind at 4 o'clock in the morning. So for a lot of people, they will have an opportunity to write a list next to their bed. But you need to make sure it goes from that piece of paper next to your bed onto something that's a little bit more concrete and a little bit more categorized and organized, don't you? So, but for me, the first step is actually brain dumping all of the things that need to be done. Or if you have got several lists everywhere, like pieces of paper here, notebooks there, gather them all together into one place, right?
Absolutely, Leslie. So you need to think about what kind of list works for you, and also how you're going to capture this list, right? Is this going to be something that you're going to write down on pieces of paper? Are you behind your computer a lot or on your phone a lot? And do you want to open a notes tab on your phone so you can keep track there? Or do you want to go to a more almost like an app? Or do you want to, like we use Asana for our work? Do you want to take it to the next level and even maybe get a free version of an Asana kind of task, kind of project holder thing? How are you going to log the information and retrieve it and work with it?
You think that Asana, like that assessment of what you called their very comprehensive list making system? I don't think you'll be working for their marketing.
I know, I struggled to get it out of my head, Leslie.
So for anybody that doesn't know what Asana is, it's a digital to-do list and task management system. It's a project, thingy, whatever, writing it down according to Ingrid. But basically, it's quite a comprehensive list-making system, which allows you to work either independently or as part of a team with deadlines, priorities, notes, attachments, all of those kind of things. Yeah. And it works quite seamlessly together. There is absolutely a free version of it. If what you're doing at the moment doesn't work, it may be time for a change. And so don't be put off by something digital, because people who create digital systems typically think of everything. They think of deadlines, priorities, sharing, attachments, voice notes, all of those kind of things that maybe are something that you might work within, and you think, oh, that wouldn't work for me. Maybe to go something where you can be a little bit more reactive, where it sends you a reminder and says, oh, by the way, Leslie, you need to do this today because you said that 4 weeks ago that you wanted to do that. Maybe being a little bit more reactive to something would work better rather than you having to do all of the thinking all the time. So if something isn't working for you, it might be your opportunity to move over and to think about doing something different. Don't go all in. So, trial it, see how it goes, see how a digital system works. Many of my clients who have been doing the kind of writing things down on the back of envelopes, creating multiple notebooks with different kinds of lists that have sat there that are still there 3 years later, I've managed to convince them move over to Asana or something very similar to that. And it's worked really well. But like any system, you have to commit to it, right, Ingrid? You have to go, yes, you can trial it, but you kind of need to commit to that small trial to give it a chance of working. You need to be open-minded enough to give it a chance. And so, don't be put off by digital if you've always been paper, because some people, and just think about all the digital things on your phone that work really well for you. You can take that to that next level. But this is not really all about pushing Asana, for example. And there are many others, Asana, Trello, Todoist. There's loads of different versions of that that all work quite seamlessly with sort of very clever people putting them together. So I think that, really at this stage, you need to evaluate what kind of system you've been using. If it has been a system, can you call it a system? If it's just on scraps of paper here, there and everywhere, and think about whether or not it's working and whether you need to make a change. So think about what that system's going to look like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because also then once you've got your lists, then you can start to prioritize as well, right? Because then you can go, okay, actually of all the things I need to do, these are the 2 or 3 things that are the most important of all of them. When everything's whirling in your head, how can you then decide what you really should do now or what you actually could do next week?
Exactly. And there are different versions of that, Ingrid. So if we talk about something like Asana, you can assign a deadline to something, but just because the deadline is 2 weeks from now doesn't mean to say that today is not the day for you to do that task. And so they're 2 very different things. One is a sort of deadline and one is a priority. And you have to look at both of those things in conjunction together and decide what you're going to do today, but know why you are deciding to do that today and evaluate whether that's the right thing to do today. So for me, when it comes to a Friday, for example, there might be things that I kind of need to get done, but I know that I don't work my best because I start to lose interest by a Friday afternoon. And so I will typically do things like training and all those kind of things that don't require deep work on a Friday afternoon, because I know that my mind starts to wander, and Ingrid definitely knows that my mind starts to wander on a Friday afternoon. And so I will put things in knowing that that's when I'm not going to be at my best. And your version of that might be, I'm not at my best first thing in the morning when I've just got out of bed. My best time is in an afternoon. And so that's when I'm going to do my deep work, my kind of important work, my phone calls, my difficult work, it might be my challenging work, whatever that might be. Yeah. And so really evaluate when the right time is for you. I think that's so important, isn't it, Ingrid?
Yeah, I think you have to look at your own energy levels and your own, what's your best time of the day. But also, of course, you need to keep in mind timings of other people. I mean, it might be nice that you think I'm at my best at 9 o'clock in the evening, but if you can't ring anybody because all the shops are closed, it's not going to help. So you have to really think that through and kind of also look at when is a good time for me to do this task, when I can reach other people, when I can contact the helpline or expect a reply from a support inbox or a chat bot or whatever, to, okay, now when I need to read something and really focus, I need to be more quiet. I can't do that when the kids have come back from school and they all want to play and run around and do stuff. I need to do that in the morning when I've just dropped them off and the house is nice and quiet. So I think there's a lot of things to take into consideration what the best time is and for you and in the environment that you're in. So let's go for a break. And then after the break, we will continue our quest to how to get things done. Hi, everyone. Welcome back after your break. We're just talking about lists, and it kind of makes me happy, but it makes me realize as well, Leslie, how much we do.
Yes. Well, we're sitting here talking about lists. We're not ticking anything off our list. We are ticking off our list, record episode 260, which is on our list.
Yes, exactly.
So we are ticking something off our list.
Yes.
We talked about making a list, and what we want to talk about is prioritizing that list. And so I think I alluded to it a little bit where we talked about there's a difference between what you want to do today and what a deadline is, and you need to understand the difference between those 2 things. So how do we prioritize a list, Ingrid, at its most basic level?
I think what you need to do is look at each task and go, okay, is this something that is a high priority? It needs to be done now. It needs to be done today. Crucial. Otherwise, things go badly wrong. It has to be done now. Or is it a medium priority? Yes, it's important, but it doesn't have to be done today. I can do it tomorrow or the day after. Or is it actually a low priority? Not super important, but yeah, it still has to be done. Or why is this thing on my list? No priority at all. I need to outsource this to somebody else or delegate it or get it off my list or give it to somebody else preferably. Or actually, do I need to do this at all? I don't want to even have this on my list. This is not important. Not important. Gone. So you have to, I think, because if you just see a whole list and you don't prioritize, everything either seems important or not important, and you're still not moving any further. So I think you have to really go, okay, which of these things need to be done now?
Yeah, I think realism plays a big part in your evaluation of what high priority, medium priority, low priority, and not a priority is. So I think you need to understand kind of new shiny object syndrome. So, for example, I fall foul of that quite a lot. So if something's new and shiny and looks really interesting, I'll perhaps sometimes assign a higher priority to that because it's an interesting thing to do, rather than something that's been sitting on the list that's actually really important, that's been sitting there for 4 months not getting done. And so I think it's the time to get real about, where are these priorities being assigned from? Are they being assigned with the right rationale sitting behind them? Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's a problem for a lot of people, isn't it? We're like, oh, I want to do that today. I need to get that done today. And that might be somebody else is pushing you for that information. You know what I mean? But, you need to assign your own priorities, right? And assign your own task list and understand your own kind of procrastination or getting distracted or focusing on the wrong things or procrastinating on something because you think it's going to be really difficult. Those kind of things. There's so many things with writing a list. Like the way that we go about our day-to-day chores is really interesting, isn't it? Because how many times have people said, I've literally not done that task. I've left it on my list for 5 months. And then when it got round to it, it actually took me 5 minutes. But it sits there looming large over you for all that time, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think as well, it becomes bigger in your head the longer you think about it and the longer you leave it. And I think that doesn't help either. Because I think it really eats up a lot of our energy. I think it kind of sucks the energy from your body because you've got to do it, but you can't. And you're like, oh. And it's like the less you feel energized to do something. And then when you finally do it, it's like, wow, this was actually a 20-minute job. And I'm so happy. And it can give you a tremendous boost as well. But I think it's also important, Leslie, that you have to really also, you talked about realism there. If I look at it from a decluttering perspective, for example, right? A lot of people feel overwhelmed by their clutter, but then they can really almost hyper focus on something very, very small. Now, of course, doing something small is very good because it can kind of kickstart you into doing a little bit longer, a little bit more. A good example is I was working with a client, it's a while back, but she's like, oh my gosh, Ingrid, I really want to do my jewelry. And I went, that's fantastic. But we haven't done your clothes and your shoes. So let's do that first, because jewelry is very small, but also very fiddly. And I know how long it takes to do jewelry. Even if there's not loads, but still jewelry can be very, very time consuming. So it's sometimes better to do bigger and bulkier items first to create space. And then once you kind of got the hang, you've got the basics down, then you can kind of focus on more in-depth decluttering. So it's the same with, I think, with a to-do list. It can be very oh, I'm going to do this small thing. But if you just do a couple of small things, you're never going to get time to do the big rocks, right? It's like this, you've got these glass jars where they put the sand in first and the small stones, and then there's nowhere for the big stones to go. But if you put the big stones in first and do them first, and then put in the small stones and the sand, everything suddenly fits.
Oh, because nice little imagery there, Ingrid.
I know, but it's tempting to kind of do, oh, I'm just going to do something small, but I'm just going to do the one phone call here and the one thing there and the one thing there and one thing there. But the big thing that's been on your list for this is really important. La, 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 I'm not seeing it, I'm not hearing it, I don't want to do it. And then it never gets done.
And there's a flip side to that as well, Ingrid. I was thinking about your kind of examples as well. And this shows why it's a personal evaluation of things. Because so something like, to go with your example of jewelry, for example, if what sits behind that, if somebody's not done the shoes and not done the clothes, and so the realistic, sensible thing from your perspective would be we do the shoes and the clothes first for good reason, to motivate you forward, blah, 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 because jewelry's going to take you ages and it's fiddly. But if, for example, somebody has lost a diamond ring and knows that it's somewhere in there and that's eating away at them, and they've got this kind of yearning to do that, and that's going to then allow them to break free of that and then to focus on the bigger things later, then that's the right thing to do for them. Yeah. But it's all about being realistic about what your motivation is for doing that and your why. What is your why? What is what's going to motivate you forward and drive you forward? So there's, we talk all the time about the fact that, decluttering is a very, very personal journey. Yeah. Making a to-do list is a very personal journey, the same things. We've got people who write lists, who write them in notebooks. We've got people who do bullet journals. We've got people who live by a list. We've got people who never have a list. We've got, but you need to work out what is working for you. If you've got a system that's working for you and you're getting through your chores and you're getting through your list and it works, don't change anything. But we've got so many people who come to us and go, I've literally got a list all the time and it never works. I never get to the bottom of my list. We've got a lot of people at the moment talking about doing a done list, right, Ingrid, as well. So a lot of people are motivated by achievement. And so what they're doing, as well as possibly there must have been a to-do list at some point, but they're also writing a done list to try and big themselves up about, this is what I've done. This is what I've achieved this week. And I love that as a sense of motivation. If that's what's going to motivate you forward, keep that in there. If you've got an Asana list like us digitally, and you've got the option to see for me, I need to see the complete things gone because I don't want them to muddy the waters. But there's an option for you to show what you've done and what you've not done yet. And if you're motivated, you can flip between those two. And so I think it's really important for you to understand what is the thing that drives you forward. Luke was on the podcast a few months ago talking about the way that he works with to-do lists. Again, he has to score out he talks about doing it with like a Sharpie or a big marker pen so that he can't see those tasks that he's done. So he completely scores it out so you can't even see it because it's just too distracting for him, which is really interesting. And so I think that you've got to work out what's working for you and try and find a different way for something that's not working. I think it's fair to say most people who come to us, Ingrid, their list making and prioritization isn't working as well as they would like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think it really helps. What we do all the time is we talk about how you can break tasks down into small, manageable chunks. How do you do that? How do you set your goals? Are the goals not too big? Make them smaller. What can you reasonably achieve? How are you going to look at time? Do you need to block time in your diary? Do you want to use the Pomodoro technique of setting a timer for 10 or 20 minutes and do it like that? Do you want a countdown timer on screen that you can use to work on something? For everybody, something different works. Like some people are very visual and want to see their labels and see their boxes. And other people are like, no, I don't want to see it. I want to have it behind doors as long as when I open the doors, I can see it. We're all different creatures. We're all different people that different things work for.
I think one of the really important things, Ingrid, is that you are constantly evaluating and revising lists as well. So you and I use a digital to-do list. That's where everything is recorded. So everything that we've ever thought of at any point is in there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's very well categorized. It's very well prioritized in terms of deadlines. We've even got things in there that we call nice to haves that have got no deadline or no priority on them. They're just things that we've thought about at some point that we don't want to lose that thought about. But what we do before, and we work with, Ingrid's work is more reactive, I think, for the most part, isn't it? And Ingrid's doing a lot of like weekly things and a lot of kind of constant recurring tasks. Mine's a little bit more forward planning, a little bit more, isn't it, Ingrid? So I would work a few weeks ahead. So we work in very different ways, but we're still working from the same list. And so Ingrid would work within my tasks, which is like, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing next week? That kind of thing. I would work more on a project by project basis and look at the whole project and go, what can I lump together in this sort of project work that I'm doing? But then I might work in my tasks as well once it starts to get, kind of closer to the time, just to make sure that I've not missed anything. And so I think it's, it's nice to be able to, that's where a digital to-do list comes in, because it allows you to filter in different ways as well. It allows you to, so when we're having every quarter, we have like a sort of meeting, don't we, to evaluate, to go over what we have done, what's coming in the next quarter and things like that. That's when we typically will go through everything in our list and go, what's priority now? Are we going to change the priority on that? Are we going to ditch it? And a lot of times when we get to that, we're like, we thought about that 6 months ago. We've not done anything with it. There's a reason why we've not done anything with it, and that can just go, and we're never going to do that. And so I think there's got to be a constant kind of evaluation of that list as well to make sure that it's something that is sensible to you, right?
Yeah. And I think that the same goes for people at home. Yes, you reprioritize, and you might have thought, okay, I want to now focus on my kitchen, but then something happens I think it was one of our members who wrote a while back saying, I suddenly had a couple of hours that we didn't have the kids around. My husband and I were by ourselves at home. And we then decided, let's do something together in the garage. Let's do some decluttering. Let's go through some stuff because we needed to have the manpower with the two of us. And it really made me happy. And I know the garage isn't finished, but we've made a really good dent with the two of us. And now I'm going to continue working on the kitchen. So you have to be able to kind of change as and when needed as well, and have that flexibility in yourself. You know, a list doesn't have to be rigorous or prescriptive or this is the only way. And I think that's one of the things that is so important with us within the Declutter Hub. We would never say this is the only way you can do something. We both are very aligned with how we teach decluttering and organizing, but we always give different options that people can try out because we want to offer that to our members and to be able for them to go, the only thing we want is for you to move forward with your decluttering and to have that success and to feel that positive impact that decluttering has. And making a list or having a list, in our opinion, can really help with that.
Definitely. So just to kind of summarize, Ingrid, because what we talked about right at the beginning was that we were going to talk about making a list, prioritizing a list, executing on that list, and evaluating the list, and then starting the cycle all over again. So our lists change all the time because I take some things, write some lists on a day-to-day basis in a written format as well. So I think first things first, you need to get that information out of your mind or off all of those disparate lists, I think. Bring them all together, categorize them and put them into a usable format. Then you need to prioritize that list and really dig down deep into that realism and go, am I being honest about how much of a priority this thing is? Or am I just putting it as a high priority because it's something that I really want to do rather than something that I really need to do? So really think and dig deep and take yourself out of your comfort zone and the way that you've done things before and really evaluate your own behavior and how you execute on tasks. Are you procrastinating on things that you shouldn't be? You know, really think that through. I think executing on that list, how are you going to do that? Where are your energy levels? We talked about breaking things down into small, manageable chunks. You know, think about pulling things together that are similar. You know, do a certain number of smaller tasks together in an hour if you've got an hour. If an hour's too much for you, break it down into 15 minutes or go, do you know what? I'm having a cup of tea now. I'm going to sit down, and in between this cup of tea and my next cup of tea, I'm going to make sure that I do this and take this task off my list. So really think about that as well. And then, of course, we have to evaluate the way our list making and prioritization and all of that kind of stuff is working and constantly tweak and change. So important that you've got that cycle. And so that's really what we wanted to talk about today, because it works for us, doesn't it? And we see it working. Once people think, do you know what, the way that I'm doing list making at the moment is just not working for me, let me seek out another solution. Really works for people, doesn't it, Ingrid?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to hear from you listeners. Has this podcast inspired you to think about your to-do lists and your current systems? And have we given you food for thought? And do you maybe want to try out some of the suggestions that we've given to you? We'd love to know. So share with us in the comments. Tell it to us in the Facebook group. Send us an email if you want. If you have an opinion about this podcast, let us know. We would love to hear from you. And yeah, we appreciate you listening in, week out. So thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.